Gamers were cheering and heaping praise for the release of gameplay footage for Ghost of Yte, the long-awaited sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, and a large majority of people were happy about it, but a big enough minority of people were echoing the same sentiment that we hear all the time nowadays. Not another bored, angry lesbian character as the main focus for a video game. And this is something we keep seeing in the gaming industry these past few years when it comes to content that has been being pushed at the forefront of every developer, at least in the Western side of the gaming industry. And I think this is a sentiment that I would dismiss because we always hear about complaints about diversity right now in the gaming industry, and some of it is true and some of it is kind of overblown and over-exaggerated. But I think in this case, this is echoing something that people are becoming fatigued with in the gaming industry, where we constantly have to have a push of strong female characters. And I think that's okay. We've always had a history of strong female characters in the gaming industry, so there's nothing really wrong with it. But I think now we have an artificial design pattern that has been implemented for every single game that is going for this aim of having strong female representation, where almost uniformly they have a similar look, appeal, and focus. And I think that is the thing people are having a problem with in this generation of gaming. And I think Ghost of Yte is reflecting that so perfectly, so that it's giving valid criticisms to the people that are making these complaints. And I think that is the thing that we're seeing with Ghost of Yte and its character design, because I think the character design is bringing out a lot of backlash, because the game itself looks like Ghost of Tsushima, has all the same gameplay, and there's nothing really to make a big complaint about, rather than it being a rehash and a remodel of the previous game that we once saw. And I think that is my only real complaint with this gameplay feature and preview, where it just kind of looks like an extension of the previous game. It doesn't feel like a building upon that game, and it kind of has a less interesting focus of the story. And I think that is the thing that a lot of people are seeing. But I think the complaints coming back to the character design are very real, because it feels like we already played this type of game. And it goes back to what we saw earlier this year with Assassin's Creed Shadows, where we had a character that fits that archetype I mentioned before, a bored, angry lesbian. We see this with Assassin's Creed Shadows, and now where her character has an arc that we keep seeing in the gaming industry that's trying to push these LGBTQ representative icons onto the gamer and player base at an expedient rate, where we keep seeing these characters that have the same background, have the same thought processes, have the same ambitions, and just it feels monotonous and boring. I know people are going to say that you see this with a lot of male characters, but you're talking about a male-dominated demographic of people right now that are playing video games. That are the majority audience that you're trying to appeal to, and that is just the basic numbers and facts, where 85% of your game players are male, and that you're just missing out on that audience when you're focusing on these fringe characters and characteristics that really don't attract those players. And I think when you add on top of that the terrible character design and the flimsy romantic options, it becomes annoying to play these type of games, especially when you just previously played one that came out recently this year. And I think now in Assassin's Creed Shadows is a perfect example of that. And I think that's why game players are looking at Ghost of Yte and they're thinking, oh, okay, we're getting the same game again. We're getting the same type of character, the same type of design style, and we're probably not going to get anything impressive at all. And I think that's the unfortunate thing that we're seeing in the gaming industry right now, where a lot of developers are following the same method of creating worlds right now and developing video games, where they're stuck in kind of a politicized activist mindset, where they have to include these checkmark design patterns because it's a mandate from the executives, the mandate from investors, it's a mandate in the industry as a whole. And I think that's what people are seeing right now with games like Ghost of Yte, even if that is not the case. But unfortunately, when you look at the actress that is put for this role in her design, it obviously is the case. You can see this with the main actress who's playing the main character in Ghost of Yte. She is the representation of all the ideals that Western gaming influencers, Western gaming journalists and consultancy firms and investment banks want to see. They want something that has all the representation wrapped in one. They want to see some person that has all the reflections of what they want to see in society reflected back in characters. And that's why when we see this character, we just see a modern day progressive activist mirroring their own image in a video game. And I think that is the thing people are tired of. We don't want to see this activist messaging. We don't want to see this activist modeling. And I think that is the thing that we see so consistently in the gaming industry, that we can create gigantic collages with similar faces and none of them being aesthetically appealing, because that is just not in line with the progressive ideals when it comes to body positivity, racial, gender equity that they want to infuse into the gaming world. And I think that is the thing that we're seeing right now with the model that they chose for Ghost of Yte. When you look at the character themselves, they just look like a random NPC character. And I think that is the biggest design flaw that we're seeing right now, where it just looks like you're playing as an NPC character. There's nothing unique and appealing about the character design. And I think that is the thing that is pushing people off as well. When you're a gamer, you're trying to attract a large male-dominated audience. You can't have an NPC character design where the character just feels like a random, non-associated computer character in the background. She looks like she should be selling things at the shop there, not really being the main character of the story. And I think that is the thing that we're seeing being lost right now with the people designing this game for Ghost of Yte. That's why people are talking about this game in such a way where it feels like it's not even being made by game developers. To a certain extent, to the people complaining about this, they're going to put up the usual pictures where they're saying, okay, this is not really the development team that really worked on the previous game. When that is not the case, a lot of the people that did work on the game are still there. People present this picture all the time saying it changed. These pictures are the development team's changes. That's not the case. All these people are still working there, at least the majority. And that is the case for Ghost of Yte. A lot of the male developers are still there. But I think the thing that we see consistently in the gaming industry is a shifting of focus of what they want to put up as a representation of gaming. And I think that's why you keep seeing these all-female development teams, because they're trying to have that as a representation of the game, and what they seek as a representation of the game plays out in the story and the overall development of the game. And that's why this picture is important. They're trying to show that we're not focused on the game anymore. It's about something more than that. And I think that's why Ghost of Yte is hitting all those triggers for a lot of people, where we feel like, oh, this game is about representation rather than actually making a good game anymore. And more than anything, it just looks like Ghost of Tsushima so much, and it looked like they really changed anything, because it's not about changing anything and making anything better. It's about just putting representation at the forefront. So that's why we have a reskin game almost of Ghost of Tsushima. And I think that is the thing people are noticing. And I think that is my problem with this game a little bit. It just looks like they brought in the assets from Tsushima, and then they're just trying to get a quick buck, and they're bringing in all the activists to put in their 1 or 2 cents in there. And that's why it feels like we have all these window dressing things added on. We have the lo-fi beats that they added on to the game, where you can listen to lo-fi beats while you're playing the game, where you have all these other modes, the Kurosawa mode, you have the black and white mode, which I think they had that in Ghost of Tsushima, so it's cool and all. But I feel like they're just adding these little things trying to draw you in, because they don't really have anything else to say. And I think that is the thing that we're seeing right now. And I think they probably could have said more with Jin, but they're trying to do this different character each game story, which I think is interesting. But I think this is going to be a decided failure in comparison to Tsushima. And I think with Tsushima, it's a massive success. This game is going to be successful too, but it's probably going to sell half as much copies. And it's going to downgrade people's excitement for the next game that they're producing. And I think that's what we saw with Spider-Man 2. Still sold 10 million copies, but it didn't sell 25 million copies like Spider-Man 1, because it was a noticeable downgrade, and people are just not interested in the game that is just not focused on the main character of the game. Spider-Man 2 still had Peter Parker, but it was focused on Miles Morales, and it had all these elements of representation, diversity, equity, inclusion, and that's what broke away people from purchasing that game in excess. And I think that's what's probably going to happen with Ghost of Tsushima. And I know some people were complaining that we didn't have a character that looked like Eve from Stellar Blade. You don't really need that exactly to be the character design. I think people are over exaggerating the need for that. I think you just need some character that doesn't look like a non-playable character. And I think for Ghost of Yte, the main character looks like a nobody, and it doesn't look like a character you would actually want to play as. And I think that is a failure that we're seeing right now. This doesn't look like someone that is interesting at all, and I doubt they're going to have the good story to go back with it. I already know this character is probably by themselves. The parents are probably not there anymore. She's probably going to be traveling with random new people. And she's going to have a lesbian relationship. We already know this is going to happen. And that's why it's a boring game automatically. I think if they had this type of character, I wish she would probably have a husband and kids, and she's probably fighting for that. That would probably get me more engaged with the story, but I doubt they'll do that. This is just going to be the same thing that we usually see from these characters. It's going to be mostly focused LGBTQ representation. She's going to have a bored and angry personality that is just not interesting. And I think that's the thing that we can expect. And I think that's what gamers are expecting. And we're not going to get anything more nuanced or interesting. And I think that's the unfortunate thing that a lot of gamers are lamenting right now. And I think with the character design, you can simply just change it to something like this. And you can have the type of character that you want. That character that is the bored, angry lesbian. That's fine then if it looks like this. But it still wouldn't be as great as a game. But I think if you have a better character design where the character just pops up and looks interesting, I think this AI redesign is probably a better representation of what gamers would be able to begrudgingly sink in and actually be interested in the game. I think just the character design alone is going to push away people. People are going to be like, I don't want to play as this character. It's not interesting. She looks like my Korean auntie. I don't want to play as this character. I think that is a lot of things people are going to say, especially when a lot of the market for video gaming is Asian and white male dominated. So a lot of Asian guys are not going to play this game. They don't want to play as their mom. So I think that is the thing that a lot of developers in the West just don't simply understand about the current market right now. And I think Yotei is going to suffer for it. I think Yotei, it still looks interesting, looks cool. I want to play it. I think it looks redundant for the most part. It looks like we're just doing the same things. It looks like the same type of game. And the character just doesn't look interesting. I don't really care about her story. She seems like a same character that we saw in Assassin's Creed almost, so it doesn't look that good. I wish they would create a different story around this character. I know people are gonna say it doesn't look realistic. She's beating up all these people, but this is a game, and it kind of does fault it a little bit because Ghost of Tsushima is trying to be super realistic. So it kind of goes, this doesn't look realistic. She's beating up all these male warriors with the sword that she looks like she can't even hold. But this is a video game. I don't really care for that, but other people might be frustrated with that. But this game has its problems, but I think it's still going to be somewhat successful. But it's losing out a large part of the audience because just the character itself doesn't look that interesting. And I think the people criticizing it for it have a valid criticism. The people going too far saying it should look like Stellar Blade Eve are just out of their mind. And not every character has to look like Eve, but they have valid criticisms. But that's just my thoughts on the situation. Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think this game looks amazing. A lot of people are saying online it looks amazing, but I don't know. It just looks like Ghost of Tsushima rehash, reskin, trying to get more money, and there's nothing really wrong with that. But if you're trying to make something revolutionary, yeah, there's something wrong with that. But you tell me what you think about the situation. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.